Nathaniel Langthon was certain this would be just another quiet Sunday lunch. Polished, calm, seated in his favorite upscale restaurant, he looked every bit the composed tech magnate whose name dominated headlines. Beside him sat his 9-year-old daughter, Emily, her face tilted down, fingers absently fiddling with her fork. She had not spoken a single word in years. The air around their table was still, almost heavy. Nathaniel glanced over the menu, not noticing right away when the server approached. She was young, 29, with steady eyes and a posture that spoke of long hours on her feet. Pamela stopped a careful pace behind Emily's chair, and without uttering a word, she began to move her hands in deliberate, precise shapes. Emily looked up. Her eyes widened, and then, against all that had become routine, a soft smile began to form on her lips. Nathaniel's hand trembled on the stem of his wine glass. In that moment he knew this afternoon was no ordinary outing. Something he thought he had locked away was opening in front of strangers. What happened next would turn a quiet lunch into a public spectacle and expose secrets Nathaniel Langthon had buried for years. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Nathaniel Langthon was the kind of man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and struck unease in competitors. He'd built his fortune in the unforgiving world of technology, a figure celebrated for his vision and feared for his uncompromising deals. Yet the sharpest edge of his life wasn't in the marketplace. It was at the table in that restaurant, where his 9-year-old daughter Emily sat in silence, her voice absent since she was 3. To those who didn't know, she was a quiet child lost in her own world. To Nathaniel, she was the one part of his life he could not control, no matter how much power he wielded. Then there was Pamela, 29, African American, a part-time waitress with a past she rarely spoke of. Somehow, in the space of a few heartbeats, she connected with Emily in a way no one had. How did Pamela know Emily's language? Why did Nathaniel's initial surprise shift so quickly into visible rage? And what secret could possibly tie the three of them together? Stay with me, because in the next hour, you'll see how a single meal became a national headline. Nathaniel Langthon's life was the picture of triumph. Photographs in glossy magazines captured him on the steps of charity galas, in tailored suits at technology summits, or shaking hands with political figures. To the public, he was the embodiment of the self-made billionaire, sharp, relentless, and impossibly polished. Yet behind those curated moments was a man who guarded his private life with almost obsessive precision. He rarely appeared in public with his daughter Emily, and when he did, it was brief, calculated, and devoid of questions from onlookers. Family privacy wasn't just a preference for Nathaniel, it was a rule. Emily's story was far different. She had been a bright and talkative child until her 3rd birthday, when words seemed to abandon her. What followed were years of therapies, specialists, and hope that with enough resources, her voice might return. But every effort failed, and Emily retreated deeper into her own silent world. Pamela's life was a world away from Nathaniel's. She took late-night bus rides after double shifts, spent her mornings caring for an elderly neighbor, and dedicated her free time to volunteering at a community center for deaf children. She never sought attention, but those who knew her spoke of her quiet determination and empathy. Still, there was something about her past she never shared. And as it turned out, Pamela's connection to Emily was no coincidence, and Nathaniel knew it. The hum of quiet conversation filled the restaurant, the soft clink of cutlery echoing against the polished wood and glass. Nathaniel Langthon sat at his corner table, eyes on his phone, while Emily sat beside him, a small sugar packet crumpled in her hands. She turned it over and over, her small fingers fumbling with the seal, her brow creased in frustration. From across the room, Pamela noticed. She approached with measured steps, stopping just beside Emily's chair. Without a word, she knelt so her eyes were level with the girl's. Her hands moved in gentle, deliberate shapes. "Do you want help?" Emily froze. Then slowly, as if remembering a language she thought was lost, signed back. For the first time in years, the corners of her mouth lifted. Nathaniel looked up, his jaw tightening as his gaze shifted from Emily to Pamela. "Don't talk to her," he said, his voice clipped and cold. Conversations at nearby tables faltered. Heads turned. Pamela didn't move, her expression calm, her hands still resting lightly on the table's edge. Nathaniel's voice rose, sharp enough for the entire room to hear. "Step away from my daughter." The air between them seemed to tighten, but then Emily did something no one had seen in years. Emily's small hand moved toward Pamela's, fingers shaping a full sentence in fluid, confident signs. The movement was so natural, so sure, that for a moment, the entire room seemed to freeze. Gasps rippled among the nearby tables. Nathaniel Langthon's expression shifted from tight control to something colder, his eyes narrowing as though the sight itself was an offense. Without a word, he stood, taking Emily's hand in his own and led her toward the door. Before leaving, he placed a thick stack of bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal twice over, and tucked his business card neatly beneath the edge of a saucer. Hours later, as Pamela prepared for bed, her phone lit with an unknown number. When she answered, the voice on the other end was low and deliberate. "Stay away from my daughter." The call ended before she could speak. The next day, whispers began moving through the restaurant, stories of Nathaniel's temper, of how fiercely he controlled his private life. That afternoon, a local reporter who had been dining nearby leaned across the bar to ask a quiet question. He'd overheard just enough to know there was more here than a tense lunch, and what the reporter found made Nathaniel's anger look like fear. The reporter's digging began quietly, with a few calls to colleagues and a search through old community articles. It didn't take long to find Pamela's name connected to a private clinic known for its work with children suffering from selective mutism and trauma-related speech loss. Buried in the clinic's old event flyers was a familiar face, Emily, years younger, smiling faintly beside Pamela during a group therapy exercise. According to the clinic's records, Emily's time there had been brief, abruptly cut short after only 3 sessions. Former staff members, speaking on condition of anonymity, remembered the day Nathaniel Langthon arrived at the clinic unannounced. Their accounts hinted at family issues and legal threats that left the staff rattled. Pamela, when approached by the reporter, didn't hesitate to confirm what she already knew the moment she saw Emily in the restaurant. She had recognized her instantly, not only by her face but by the small, distinct way she formed certain signs. Pamela also knew why Emily had stopped speaking, and it wasn't a mystery any therapist had been able to solve on paper. But Pamela's version of events was about to be challenged. By midweek, the story was no longer confined to whispers in a restaurant. A grainy phone video surfaced online, filmed by a diner who had witnessed the confrontation between Nathaniel Langthon and Pamela. In the clip, the moment Emily reached for Pamela's hand and began signing played out in full view, followed by Nathaniel's sharp command for Pamela to step away. Within hours, the video spread across social media platforms, drawing millions of views and igniting a firestorm of opinion. Some commenters rushed to defend Nathaniel, insisting that a father had every right to control who interacted with his child, especially in public. Others accused him of deliberately isolating Emily, cutting her off from anyone who might reach her in ways he could not. As the debate raged, whispers reached boardrooms and investor calls. Sponsors who had long aligned their brands with Nathaniel began to quietly question his judgment and stability. The pressure mounted from all sides, and then someone from Nathaniel's own past stepped forward. The woman who stepped forward was Claire Hensley, Emily's former nanny, who had worked in the Langthon household when Emily was just a toddler. In her interview with the reporter, she described an afternoon that had haunted her for years, an afternoon when a routine playtime by the backyard pool nearly turned tragic. Claire claimed Emily had slipped into the water unnoticed and was pulled out only after several seconds underwater. She insisted she had called for help immediately, but Nathaniel's reaction was not concern. It was fury. He accused Claire of negligence, his voice sharp enough to make the little girl cry. According to Claire, that day marked the last time Emily spoke more than a word at home. The silence that followed was not just sudden, it was absolute. Claire also revealed that Pamela had been Emily's favorite therapist during her short time at the clinic, the only one who could coax even the smallest responses from her. Then, without explanation, Nathaniel had removed her from therapy and cut off all contact. When these claims were put to Nathaniel in a televised interview, the camera lingered on him as he hesitated, his polished composure flickering. His silence in that moment spoke louder than any denial could. But Emily herself was about to have the last word. The charity event was held in a sunlit hall filled with families, volunteers, and the quiet hum of conversation. Nathaniel Langthon arrived unannounced, standing at the back near the entrance, his presence commanding attention without a single word. On the small stage, Pamela moved through the crowd, greeting attendees, unaware that Emily had just stepped into the room with her school chaperone. The moment their eyes met, the space between them seemed to shrink. Emily walked forward, each step steady, until she was standing directly in front of Pamela. Then, for the first time in public, her hands began to move, not hesitantly but with certainty, shaping two simple words: "Thank you." The room fell silent, the gesture carrying more weight than any speech could. Across the hall, Nathaniel's posture stiffened, his expression shifting between pride, regret, and something he could not name. In that stillness, it became clear that control had never been the answer. Connection had. The story of Nathaniel, Emily, and Pamela was not about power, but about the courage to reach across silence, the strength to let go, and the resilience of a child who had found her voice in a language her father had never learned. Would you have stepped in if you were Pamela? Or would you have stayed silent and walked away? Tell us in the comments, and we read everyone, and your thoughts matter in stories like these. And if you thought this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear about the CEO whose biggest scandal began with a spilled cup of coffee. A single moment that unraveled an empire. That one is coming up next, and you won't want to miss it.